High in the highest mountain, deep in the deepest ocean. High in the highest mountain, in the forest, in the desert, you can see God's creation. In the forest, in the desert, you can see God.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. Dear viewers, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm your host, Karim AbuZaid, and this is episode number 39 by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by His permission and His tawfiq. And imagine, we're going to begin introducing the actual subjects of Aqeedah. And the first subject is always the subject of Eman, faith, and kufr, and disbelief. Subhanallah, we have taken 38 episodes introducing the foundation upon which we will present these subjects to you. The subject of Eman and disbelief, the rules that we must follow, or the guidelines which we must follow in order to label a certain individual to be a disbeliever. Then what can nullify the belief, the Islam of an individual, and can take him out of the fold of Islam. And then inshallah afterwards we will begin introducing the 6 articles of faith: believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which comprises the belief in His existence subhanahu, the belief in His lordship, 3, the belief in His names and attributes, 4, the belief in His uluhiyya, that we single Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out with our actions. Then we'll talk about the angels and the jinn, the 2nd article of faith. Then the message and the messengers, the books and the messengers. That is the 3rd and the 4th article of faith. Then the day of resurrection, and this is an extended article because we would have to talk about the signs and the life in the grave and death. And then certainly we will talk about the events of the day of reckoning, and then we conclude the subject of Aqeedah with talking about the 6th article, which is the belief in al-Qadr. You can tell you need to be patient. It took the Muslims, the first generation, 13 years in Mecca to learn all that stuff. So you got to be patient, and you got to be a student of knowledge. And like I warned you before so many times, that insha'Allah we follow a certain method, academic. We present these subjects in an academic manner, meaning that we do not randomly choose the subjects, rather we follow a certain sequence bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So far in the previous 38 episodes, we spoke about an introduction to the subject of Aqeedah, the definition of Aqeedah, and we made it very simple. We said that, listen, Aqeedah or Eman is simply comprises of 2 main components. Akhbar, you're told of things that you must make tasdeeq of, but that tasdeeq must mobilize or lead you to formulate the will and the intention, which has to be sincere in order to implement the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you say sami'na, we hear and we obey to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we address the subject of the names of the belief system: Aqeedah, Tawheed, Eman, and so forth, and we addressed that. And we mentioned that sometimes we call it the Aqeedah, the belief system of the saved sect, and we addressed that issue of the saved sect and how can you belong to the saved sect. And we spent also some time talking about the wasatiyah once it comes to our belief system, that we are in the middle between a lot of two extremes once it comes to so many subjects, and we detail that. I'm just summing up some of the things which we presented already so far, so I'm making that connection between the past and the future, of course. Then we have spent almost half of these episodes, almost I would say maybe 17 or 18 episodes, talking about the sources of our belief system, the sources of our Aqeedah, that a true believer does not take his belief system from societal norms, from hearsay, from dreams, from futuhat, inspiration, being inspired. No, we take our belief system from two main sources, which is the Quran and the Sunnah. Then the consensus comes as a complement. It does complement the Quran and the Sunnah, that the first three great generations agreed upon the evidences which coming to us from the Quran and the Sunnah, and we built upon this certain beliefs and certain rulings. And we also spent some time talking about the secondary sources of our belief system. The first one is the intellect. We actually spent almost 3 episodes talking about this subject, because it's a very crucial subject at this time, because a lot of Muslims they reject the beliefs because of common sense, because of rational, because of reasoning. And this trend, like we're having people right now who are denying the fact that there is punishment in the grave, and a lot throughout history they did this. Why? Because they used their intellect to judge the text, the divine text. So they used their senses to judge something that is not seen to them, which does not make any sense to begin with. And we spoke about the fitrah as well. The fitrah is the natural instinct, or the natural state, the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fashioned the human being. With this, dear brothers and sisters in Islam, dear viewers, we begin officially this episode presenting the first subject of our belief system, which is the subject of faith, Eman. A warning, I'm not talking about the articles of Eman. You see, try to differentiate between the two. I'm not talking about the articles of faith. I'm talking about the reality, the nature, the components of faith. That's what we're talking about, inshallah. And this episode will be an introduction, warm you up, because this subject, if you really grasp it, is a key to a lot of things. Here is what we will cover, the overall agenda, inshallah. The introduction is right here. It may be extended to another episode, that's fine, but we'll introduce the subject to you. Then we're going to define Eman. And now, pay attention to this. We're going to have to bring back the subject of Ijma', because you will find out that the first subject the Muslims differed upon was the definition of Eman, the definition of faith. Was the first subject. It's like this: Eman, Qadar, Sahaba. Eman, Qadar, Sahaba. That's how the Ummah started coming down. Now, why the ijma' is important here? Because there is an ijma' consensus regarding one definition. And that ijma', that consensus, is supported by evidence. Remember when I'm going to remind you now, and this is so important why when you watch this series, you have to go back because, listen, it's a sequence we're building up. Remember when we spoke about ijma' consensus, what did we say? The majority of the scholars, they say ijma' has to be on the basis of Quran and Sunnah. So the consensus of the Ummah must be upon an evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah. And that's why we say the ijma', the consensus, complement the Quran and the Sunnah in a way. طيب. Also, the most binding ijma' or the binding ijma', the binding consensus, is the consensus of the first three great generations, especially the companions. Now, did they define Eman in a certain way and they had a consensus over it? Yes, they did. Yes, they did. So, now, those who deviated, those who differed, they went away from the ijma' afterwards. And that is why the fourth subject which we will address, the deviations with respect to the definition of Eman. How the Muslims deviated in defining Eman. But be careful, we're not labeling them all to be sects. Be careful. Be careful, because if you do this, you're taking away 90% of the Muslims. We can't do that. Because some of them, they had a slight differing with the first three great generations, and some of them had a major one. But we'll leave this to be addressed in its appointed time, inshallah, in the episodes to come. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we'll spend some time. And this is so important. This is so important to realize that how the Muslims gradually left the straight path and they gradually drifted into some speculative theology kind of religion, some opinions of philosophers and so forth. And this was the cornerstone or the reason why the Muslims went away from being the best ummah brought out for mankind. And the way to come back to this is to go back to understanding the proper true definition of Eman, the way that the first three great generations understood it, and this is the way to go, inshallah. Then the fifth thing that we'll address here in the subject of Eman, inshallah, is Islam, Eman, Ihsan. And inshallah, I will make this very simple in you, because there is a very confusing subject once it came to the components of Eman. Al-Iman al-Mujmal, Haqiqatul Eman, Al-Iman al-Mustahab. All of these things, inshallah, I will try to associate them with Eman, with Islam, Eman, and Ihsan, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And then hopefully, finally, if the time allows, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we will go on into the subject of takfir. And this is a hot subject now. A hot subject. Muslims right now, right and left, are labeling one another to be kafirs, getting one another out of the fold of Islam, and they forget that the fastest way to come out of Islam is to label another Muslim to be a kafir. Why? Because if he is not, then you are. We need to realize that there are certain rules, certain guidelines that we must follow in order to label a certain individual to be a kafir. Listen, takfir mutlaq, unrestricted takfir, you can go ahead and do it. Whoever does this is a kafir. No problem, you go ahead and do it. Whoever does this act, alim, knowing, not misinterpreting, not forced or forgetting, he's a kafir. But you say that person is a kafir, Be careful, be careful, be careful, be careful, be careful. Because this is the fastest way a Muslim can come out of Islam. And inshallah, in this side of, or this part of the Aqeedah matters, the subject of Iman and Kufr, then we're going to conclude with 10 nullifiers of Islam. 10 things that can nullify a person's Islam. But of course, after we identify the guidelines to label a certain individual to be a kafir. So this is the agenda. I think we have a very busy subject. You see, like I divided the introduction into some general subjects. What is wasatiyya? What is the safe sect? The definition of Aqeedah, and so forth. And then I went into the sources of the belief system. That was the second part of the introduction, and we spoke about the Quran, we spoke about the Sunnah, we spoke about the consensus, we spoke about the Aql, the intellect, and we spoke about the fitrah, the natural state. Now the first subject, this is a set of episodes. If you want to learn the subject of Iman and Kufr, this is the way to go, and this is the first episode bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So we're going to begin with the introduction. Discussing the concept of faith, of Iman, its meanings, divisions, its rulings is very important. Because success in the hereafter and enjoyment in this world lies in attaining the proper type of faith, of Iman. There is a type here, which the first three praised generations attained. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الذين آمنوا وتطمئن قلوبهم بذكر الله ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب. Indeed, those who believe have Iman. When you possess the proper Iman in the heart, any act that you do will grant you serenity and tranquility. And this is the password for happiness in this world. Not only this, Iman is needed for the hereafter, to be successful in the hereafter. Iman is the soul of the hearts and bodies. It is the key to happiness. You know why I'm bringing the fact that it's the soul of the bodies and the hearts? Because of that beautiful verse. وَكَذَلِكَ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ رُوحًا مِّنْ أَمْرِنَا مَا كُنْتَ تَدْرِي مَا الْكِتَابُ وَلَا الْإِيمَانُ. And thus, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we have commanded our Holy Spirit, Jibreel alayhi salam, Ruh, Jibreel, to go to you, to bring life into you and into your followers by teaching you the Iman. ما كنت تدري ما الكتاب ولا الإيمان. Look at this now. ولكن جعلناه نورا نهدي به من نشاء من عبادنا وإنك لتهدي إلى صراط مستقيم. Beautiful. That's why those are the last two verses in Surah Ash-Shura. You should read their meanings. It is out of this world. That how Iman brings life into the dead body. How, you know, like Adam alayhi salam was a flesh laying in the ground, and when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala breathed in him, here he is alive. Iman gives you life. That's why Iman is the soul of hearts and bodies. It is the key to happiness. It is the way of salvation in this world and in the hereafter. It sends contentment and satisfaction to the heart. And the higher a person climbs in the levels of Iman, and we're going to learn that there are levels of Iman. Not every person attains the same exact level of Iman, But the higher you go up in the levels of Iman, the more you get the sweetness of Iman. You see, there is a sweetness of Iman. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam actually stated that in a beautiful hadith في البخاري ومسلم, hadith Anas ibn Malik رضي الله عنه: ثلاث من كن فيه ذاق حلاوة الإيمان. You know, the Iman has taste and has sweetness. There is a sweetness for Iman, three of which, if found in anyone, he gets the sweetness of Iman. أن يكون الله ورسوله أحب إليه مما سواهما. That you love Allah and His Messenger more than you love anything, anyone else, even yourself. And that you love another Muslim, another believer, someone who has Iman, has faith, just for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that you hate to go back to disbelief, that you leave that state, that Jannah, when you enter it, that you hate to leave that state and go back to the state of disbelief, exactly like you hate to be thrown in the hell fire. The subject of Iman, dear viewers, brothers and sisters in Islam, and its components, levels, and what negates it, the major kufr, are fundamental concept of Islam. It should be a Muslim's utmost concern. You must worry yourself about the subject, dear viewers. I'm telling you, you will enjoy Islam so much if you understand that subject of Iman. Imanology, I may use that word. Imanology, is out of this world. But again, understanding the reality. This is how the best generation, the first three great generations, went up, because they understood the subject of Iman. The subject is also very important, again, because it was the first subject of dispute amongst the Muslims, and as a result of this dispute, some sects emerged into the Muslim Ummah. By understanding the origin of the dispute, insha'Allah, you will enjoy faith more than ever. You will realize also how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved His religion. Before I take a short break, I want to remind you that I'm not talking about the 6 articles of faith. Again, I'm talking about the reality of the Iman, the nature of Iman, the nature of faith, the reality of faith, the definition of faith, and the components of faith, and the types of faith, and the levels of faith. That's what I'm talking about. We're not talking about the 6 articles of Iman, because immediately as soon as a Muslim is asked what is Iman, we're like, Iman is believing in Allah, angels. La. These are the articles, the pillars of Iman. The pillars of Iman. Like Islam, it can be defined in so many ways, that you submit to Allah, and we can go over that definition as well when we actually address the subject of Iman, Islam, Iman, Ihsan. But what are the pillars of Islam? Are the 5 pillars of Islam. So we're talking about the nature, the reality of Iman. Dear viewers, brothers and sisters in Islam, don't go away. I will take a short break and I will be right back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Forest, in the desert, you can see God's creation. In the desert, you can see God's creation.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear viewers, brothers and sisters in Islam, welcome back to Aqeedah Matters. Again, by the way, you can always communicate with us through the following mediums. Email aqeedahmatters@huda.tv or karim@huda.tv. But there is a second way that you can communicate with us, and this is where, by the way, we list or we post all these videos. By the way, like I warned you always that we do follow a certain sequence of presenting the subjects of Aqeedah to you. If you happen to miss an episode or so, hopefully it will be available on Facebook page, www.facebook.com/Aqeedah Matters. And I'm kindly requesting you to go right now and like the page so that you begin receiving posts from it. Our brothers in the studio, who helped me with the preparation and producing the program, they will post these videos for you bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Dear viewers, brothers and sisters in Islam, we continue from where we stopped before the break. A warning, I'm not talking about the 6 articles of Eman. I'm talking about the reality of Eman. Now you hear me saying the word Eman all the time. Now you know it's faith, right? So Eman is faith. And I spelled it in a, it was, I mean, a lot of people spelled it this way too, so that it have some significance. So you know Aqeedah matter spelled it this way, capital E, then another E, M-A-N. So we're going to define it according to the first 3 praise generations. Then we're going to talk about the components and the levels of Eman. Now, like I mentioned at the very beginning of the episode when I was introducing the subjects which we will present in the future, that yes, it is true that the definition of Eman, of faith, was the first subject which the first subject of disagreement amongst the Muslims. But listen, there is a consensus on the definition of Eman that is adopted by the companions and the first 3 praised generations. Not only this, but this definition which is adopted by these 3 praised generations is based upon evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah. So this ijma' is binding. So why I'm saying this? Because when I say the first subject of disagreement amongst the early Muslims was the definition of Eman, there is a definition of Eman. There is one that is adopted by the Ummah, by the scholars. There is one. But those who deviated from that definition went away from that ijma' that was already established. And this is why we have to go back and study the subject of ijma'. Remember when we discussed the sources of our belief system? I want to remind you now. We said that ijma', consensus, is one of the fundamental sources of our belief system because it complements the Quran and the Sunnah. And the consensus must be based on evidences from the Quran and the Sunnah, is the view of the majority of the scholars. And that consensus of the first 3 praised generations is binding, especially the companions. Why do we need this now? Why I'm reminding you of this now? Because the definition of Eman was the first subject the Muslims differed upon, but we must also say that we do have consensus on the right definition. And this consensus is based upon evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah. And this consensus is binding because it is the consensus of the first 3 praised generations. That's why, before we introduce the subject to you, we lay down the foundation. You see, every time now we present a subject and you debate with me, you argue with me, I take you back to the foundation. I take you back to, remember we talked about ijma'. Now, if, for example, if you're debating with somebody who adopted a different definition of Eman than the definition which is adopted by the first 3 praised generations, and he's debating with you, said, listen, what is the sources of your belief system? What is the sources of Aqeedah? Okay, Quran, Sunnah, Ijma'. Those are primary. Secondary, intellect. Secondary, intellect. Normally, those who deviated from the definition of the first 3 praised generations, they use their intellect. طيب, is the intellect a primary or a secondary or a supplementary, a secondary, a primary or a secondary? He would tell you, no, it's a primary. No. Aql, intellect, reasoning for us is a secondary source. It must conform with the Quran and Sunnah and Ijma'. So you talk him back to the base, to the foundation, and this is how you debate. But you go and waste your time upon a branch when the foundation is not tackled. And this is what the scholars taught us, how to when you debate with somebody, go back to the foundation. Based on what you are making that statement, you take him back to the foundation. The foundation is what? Is the sources of our belief system, right here. طيب. That's why we need, because the definition of Iman was the first subject, that's why we need this. Now, when we say ijma', this is a very technical issue here, because immediately when you tell them, listen, there is a consensus regarding the definition of Iman, right away he will tell you, who transmitted that ijma'? Then you have to come up with the evidence. Because ijma' doesn't come like this. It must be actually known that ijma' is achieved or accomplished. Now you have to furnish evidence. Probably the next couple of slides, you don't have to understand exactly what they contain, but the least that you need to realize that these are the places where the ijma' was transmitted, where the consensus regarding the definition of Iman, of faith, was transmitted. Let's read some here. Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, rahimahullah, may Allah have mercy on him, said, most of the scholars said that Iman is a statement and action, and all of this ijma' consensus from the Salaf, the scholars of Ahlul Hadith. So this is the again, you probably, when we talk about Iman and the definition of Iman, you're going to understand what we mean by a statement and action. Al-Imanu qawlun wa amal. قول وعمل. الإيمان قول وعمل ونية. الإيمان قول وعمل واعتقاد. Different wording, and we're going to explain that for you. But this is the definition which the ijma'. Al-Shafi'i has mentioned, rahimahullah, the ijma' of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een on it, and also Abu Thawr in his book Al-Risala. He mentioned the ijma' al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah. Al-Awza'i, Abu Abdurrahman, said those who have passed away from the righteous predecessors did not differentiate between Iman and action, because some people said Iman is just you believe, tasdeeq, you make tasdeeq, you just believe, you don't have to act. Al-Awza' is saying they did not differentiate between Iman and action. Again, all of these are technical issues which you will understand later on the series, inshallah. But what I'm trying to get you to understand here, I'm furnishing the evidence for you that the ijma' was transmitted through reliable sources. More than one from the Salaf of the ulama, the scholars of Ahl al-Hadith, they did. Just look at the next slide. Just present these slides. You're going to find out how the ijma' was transmitted. Look, Imam al-Lalaka'i, rahimahullah, said, he compiled this actually in his book. He said what? Imam al-Bukhari said, لقيت ألفا من علماء الأمصار. I have met almost 1,000 scholars from the scholars of the righteous predecessors. All of them defined Iman to be faith, statement, قول وعمل, a statement and action, increases and decreases. Again, all of these, look at these. Abu Ubaid al-Qasim in his Kitab al-Iman, الإمام الأوزاعي, الإمام الشافعي, الإمام أحمد بن حنبل, الإمام إسحاق بن راهويه, الإمام المزني, the two imams أبو زرعة الرازي وأبو حاتم الرازي, الإمام البخاري in شرح أصول الاعتقاد للالكائي. All of these, you don't have to understand, these are books. These are books. Look at all these books where the ijma', the consensus, was transmitted. So we're not يعني ابن جرير الطبري, الآجري, and so forth بإذن الله تعالى, ابن عبد البر, شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية, شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية as well. طيب, what is the definition of Iman? We probably, so now we said that yes, Iman, faith, was the first subject upon which the Muslims differed to begin with, but there is an ijma' regarding one definition. Now our job is to introduce that definition to you. So this is the foundation from which we will kick off. So you understanding the proper definition of Eman adopted by the consensus, the ijma' of the first three praised generations, which was transmitted in these books, is so important before you go and study the deviations. And this is in principle, brothers and sisters in Islam. There you go and study deviated ways before comprehending and grasping and understanding in depth what you believe in. Important as a principle. Just leave the subject of Iman and Aqeedah matters here. But in principle, before you go and explore any other subject, especially once it comes to issues of i'tiqad, issues of beliefs, you must first excel in understanding your own beliefs before you try to go and explore other beliefs. Like before you go and debate with a Christian regarding the status Prophet Isa alayhi salam, according to them, then you have to understand your own beliefs regarding Prophet Isa alayhi salam. Before you go and debate with someone who uses rational, you must always go and you must first understand how Islam looks at the subject of rational and reasoning. So now, when we want to define Iman, when we want to define faith, like we normally did in the past and will do in the future, we define the word linguistically and we will define it technically. And bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, let's begin and try to define it linguistically in this episode. Hopefully time will allow us. Let's read this for a minute. Variously written in English as Eman or Eman. I guess, you know, it is rendering into English is difficult. To render it as faith, belief, or testimony does not do justice to the word. You see, I think what I'm trying to say here, that there are certain terms, Islamic terms, like Eman, like Ihsan, like Islam, like Taqwa. You cannot render the meanings contained in these individual terms into one word. I cannot just say Iman is faith. No, it's not true. You lost a lot of meanings. Yes, Iman is faith, yes, but what faith? Faith, what is the definition of it? You really have to explain the subject. These words are not just words, they are subjects, they are concepts. Here is the word I'm looking for. And you have to break down these concepts in order to be able to explain them. So let's see what we have. Linguistic definition of Iman. Linguistic definition of faith. Iman means faith or belief. The word also has connotations of security and safety. Faith or belief, its objects are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the angels, the revealed books, which is the 6 articles of faith, the prophets, the last day of judgment, and al-qadar, qadarullah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Typically, these are summarized in what we call i'tiqad, defined in simple words. Let me go down to earth with you once it comes to the definition of Iman linguistically. Iman from safety and security. Look at this. إِنَّ الْمُتَّقِينَ فِي مَقَامٍ أَمِينٍ. Indeed, the righteous will be in a safe residence, meaning Jannah. Why it's safe in Jannah? Because there is no threats. There is no worries. Basically, a believer, when he enters Jannah, he is in a permanent state of tranquility and serenity. No threats whatsoever. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who provided this, which is different into this world. Just compare those who are in paradise with those who are in earth. You see, in earth here, one day you experience safety and security, or even 1 hour, or even 10 minutes. The next 10 minutes, you're threatened. You feel insecure. You feel anxiety. You feel fear. And then you could go back to security and serenity and tranquility. Then you alternate. You shift right and left, right and left. That is why right after each salah we say, Allahumma anta salam. Oh Allah, you are the peace. Wa minka salam. And from you comes the peace, the tranquility, the serenity. So we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order to be provided that state of amn, that state of safety and security. But in Jannah, it's provided. So now, what is the relationship between the technical definition of Eman and the state of serenity and tranquility? Look at this now. When you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you believe in Him, and when you act upon that belief, you will be provided that security and safety. You see the relationship between the two? The relationship between the two. When you commit yourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by making tasdeeq, believing with certainty everything that He revealed regarding matters of unseen, and by the application or through the application of the commands, by saying sami'na wa ata'na, this way you have made peace with Allah. You have made peace with the Creator. And as a result of this, you will be at peace and you will make peace with the rest of people. You see how Eman is important? You see how Eman is important? Amazing. Amazing the connection between the linguistic and the technical in a way. In a way. So security, safety, serenity comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The source of it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, in order to get it, you must believe in Him. You must believe that He exists. You must believe that He is the Lord. You must believe that He has the most beautiful names and the most lofty attributes. And then you must single out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your action. And you must believe that He sent angels with books to messengers. And He told us about the day of resurrection, and that everything is ordained. Qadr, predestination. You believing that. And you act, you see, you making tasdeeq of this is one step. You see, you making tasdeeq of this is one step. What is the next step? Making tasdeeq of this is not sufficient. Making tasdeeq of this must create the will. Of course, Allah is the one who creates everything anyways. But you must have the intention. Making tasdeeq of this must lead you to act with your heart, with your tongue, with your limbs. And when you do this, then you find yourself entering the Jannah in earth, the paradise in earth. And you find yourself tasting the sweetness of faith. You see? Amina Eman. Amina Eman. That you are in a state of safety and security because you believed. Because you believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah consequently placed you into that Jannah. Brothers and sisters in Islam, this is just an introduction. Don't panic. Don't panic. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the next episode, we will begin defining the technical aspects of the word Eman. Again, for you to communicate with me, Karim at huda.tv, Aqeedah Matters at huda.tv, or Facebook page, www.facebook.com/Aqeedah Matters. Till the next episode of Aqeedah Matters, I leave you in the care of Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Deepest ocean. high in the highest mountain, deep in the deepest ocean, high in the highest mountain, in the forest, in the desert, you can see God creation. In the forest, in the desert, you can see God creation. He made us different nation, and there's no differentiation. He made us different nation, and there's no differentiation. If you're black, if you're white, we are all God creation. If you're black, if you're white, we are all God creation. Deep in the deepest ocean, high in the highest mountain, in the forest, in the desert, you can